Hitler believed he was saving the future. The architects of the Soviet purges believed they were protecting society. The people who burned witches believed they were fighting evil. And that's the problem. The most dangerous humans in history rarely believed they were monsters. They believed they were necessary, which creates a terrifying possibility. What if evil doesn't look evil while you're inside it? What if the people we now call villains felt almost identical to modern people psychologically? Because if that's true, then evil isn't some rare genetic defect. It's something far more ordinary, something human. And history suggests the greatest atrocities were not committed by people who abandoned morality, but by people who believed morality was entirely on their side. That's what makes this dangerous. Because once someone becomes absolutely convinced they are the hero, they stop questioning what they're capable of. Most people grow up with a childish understanding of evil. We imagine villains as obvious, cruel, sadistic, emotionless. Movies reinforce this constantly. The villain enjoys suffering. The hero protects people. Simple. But real life is almost never that clean. History's most destructive people often saw themselves as protectors. Revolutionaries believed they were creating justice. Empires believed they were bringing civilization. Religious extremists believed they were saving souls. Even violent movements usually begin with a story about righteousness. That's the disturbing part. Human beings can justify almost anything once they attach morality to it. And the more morally righteous someone feels, the less likely they are to question themselves, which means certainty can become dangerous, very dangerous, because the human brain does not want truth above all else. It wants psychological comfort. It wants coherence. It wants to feel like I am the good guy, even when reality says otherwise. Here's something psychologists discovered that should honestly unsettle you. Most people believe they are morally above average, which is mathematically impossible. But the brain protects identity before accuracy. That means when humans do harmful things, the mind automatically starts rewriting the story. We had no choice. They forced us. It was for the greater good. They deserved it. This process is called moral disengagement. And once it begins, people can commit horrifying acts without feeling like villains. That's how ordinary citizens throughout history participated in atrocities, not because they woke up evil, but because step by step their actions became psychologically normalized. One compromise at a time, one justification at a time, one enemy at a time. And eventually, things that once felt unimaginable become acceptable. That's the mechanism, not monster psychology, human psychology. The scariest part of history is not that evil people exist. It's that ordinary people can become dangerous under the right conditions. Fear accelerates it. Uncertainty accelerates it. Economic collapse accelerates it. But nothing accelerates it more than identity. The moment people divide the world into good people and bad people, something ancient activates in the human mind. Tribal thinking. And once a group becomes morally convinced of its superiority, cruelty starts feeling justified. Not cruel, necessary. That's why history repeatedly produces the same pattern. First, a population becomes afraid. Then they become emotionally unified. Then they identify an enemy. Then extreme actions become morally excusable. And every single time, the people inside the system believe they are protecting the future. That's why some of history's darkest periods were supported by ordinary citizens, teachers, workers, parents, neighbors, people who loved their families, people who probably seemed normal. That's what makes this uncomfortable, because it destroys the fantasy that evil only belongs to other people. But here's where this becomes personal. The greatest danger is not hatred. It's certainty, absolute certainty. Because once a person becomes completely convinced they are morally correct, they stop examining themselves. Questioning disappears. Nuance disappears. Empathy disappears. everything becomes simplified into us versus them. And history shows that when humans stop seeing opponents as human, almost anything becomes possible. That's why the worst atrocities in history were often committed by people who believed they were building a better world, not destroying one. But history also reveals something hopeful. The people least likely to become dangerous are not the loudest moralizers. They're the people capable of self-doubt, the people willing to pause and ask, what if I'm wrong? What information am I missing? Am I reacting emotionally or rationally? That kind of thinking sounds weak in emotionally charged environments, but psychologically, it may be one of the strongest traits a human being can have, because self-awareness interrupts ideological possession. It breaks the spell. The ability to question yourself protects you from becoming consumed by a narrative. And narratives are powerful. Powerful enough to reshape entire civilizations. Here's the truth most people avoid. Under the right circumstances, almost anyone can rationalize behavior they currently believe is impossible. That does not mean humans are inherently evil. It means humans are adaptive, terrifyingly adaptive. History proves this over and over again. People adapt to fear, to propaganda, to social pressure, to authority, to groupthink, to survival. And slowly, their moral boundaries shift without them noticing. That's why hindsight feels so shocking. We look backward and ask, how could people allow this? But the people living through those moments were asking a completely different question. They were asking, how do we protect ourselves? How do we preserve order? How do we stop the threat? And once fear merges with moral certainty, history tends to become very dark. Maybe the real lesson of history is not that evil people exist. Maybe the lesson is that human beings are capable of becoming almost anything inside the right story. Which means the people most resistant to manipulation are not the people who loudly announce their goodness. They're the people who remain skeptical of their own certainty. People who keep thinking, keep questioning, keep reflecting. Because evil rarely arrives announcing itself as evil. It arrives disguised as virtue, as necessity, as protection, as righteousness. And the moment a person becomes fully convinced they are unquestionably the hero, that's usually when they become the most dangerous. If this changed the way you think about history, or yourself, subscribe. Because the psychological systems that shaped ancient civilizations are still shaping human behavior today. Most people just never notice them.